speaker, Dr. Prachi. Could you share your screen? She's a practicing pediatric ophthalmologist, squint and neuro-opthal from Mumbai. Dr. Prachi? Yeah. She, after a long-term fellowship at Advent and then a ROP fellowship at LV Prasad and an observership under Dr. Richard Hurtle for nystagmus. She's also been on very many podiums, national and international, with number of publications and awards to her credit. She's going to be talking on evaluating vertical strabismus. On to you, doctor. Dr. Prachi?
Dr. Prachi, you're muted. Can you please unmute?
Muted. Dr. Prachi, you have to unmute.
Admin, can you please unmute her?
Yeah, am I audible now?
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am, you're audible.
Mr. Sunil, you'll have to please be conscious about informing about time, please.
Yeah, ma'am. Will do, ma'am.
So thank you, madam, for the kind introduction and for the opportunity. So moving straight into the topic, the hypertropia is generally described as per the position of the non-fixing eye. So as shown in the photo, it's a left hypertropia or a right hypotropia. However, in case of alternate fixation, the denotation is as per the hyperdeviating eye. So the types of vertical deviation could be grouped as comitant, incomitant, and a special variety called as dissociated vertical deviation. The comitant deviations could be associated with horizontal deviations, which are generally small deviations equal in all cases. It could be induced because of a small prism that is introduced into the glass because of inappropriate centration. And in cases of long-standing paresis, where the comitant spreads over all the gazes. Incomitant could be paretic or restrictive vertical deviations and due to oblique muscle dysfunctions. And DVD could be symmetric or asymmetric. I'm mainly going to try and cover the evaluation of these two entities. So let me start off with dissociated vertical deviation. It's a vertical component of the dissociated deviation, which otherwise has three components: vertical, horizontal, and torsional. The presence of DVD indicates an infantile onset of strabismus, which may be associated with profound sensory anomalies. It is always bilateral, though may be asymmetrical, generally profound in the amblyopic or the non-dominant eye, and may be associated with latent nystagmus. Few tests to uncover the DVD is that the DVD increases under the translucent Spielmann occluder. In the red filter test, the red light is always viewed below the white light, irrespective of the elevated eye, and up to down movement occurs in both the eyes simultaneously on cover test. There is something called the Posner's maneuver, wherein when we place a translucent occluder, we see one eye which is hyperdeviating. However, when we keep another translucent occluder on the other eye, we see the hyperdeviated eye come back to its original position. And last but not the least is the Belchowski's phenomenon, wherein neutral density filters placed in front of the fixing eye reduces the hypertropia of the elevated eye. The measurement is done using a prism bar under cover test, wherein an occluder with a base down prism is placed on the elevated eye and the cover is shifted till no further downward motion is noticed underneath the prism. So this is a small video of a child with DVD. If you notice that there is a small head tilt that the patient is having, and once the head posture is corrected, the DVD is beautifully. You can also see a small hyperdeviation in the right eye. So this child has asymmetric DVDs more in the left eye as compared to the right eye. Coming to the evaluation, history on as to whether it's a childhood onset or whether it's a recent onset. There is history of diplopia, whether the symptoms are variable in nature, and when the onset is not very clear, a FAT scan looking at the old photographs can always help. So this is a broad category under which the evaluation would be covered. However, the diplopia head starting and ocular torsion will be covered by Dr. Ambika. So abnormal head posture is generally classified as face turn to the right or left, head tilt to the right or left, and chin position, whether it is elevated or depressed. So when you see an abnormal head posture, the first question that we need to address is the head posture related to the strabismus? So simple clue is to straighten the head posture, which would then unveil the underlying strabismus. Another test is to just patch one eye and observe for the correction of the head posture. If both of these happen, then it is the strabismus that is responsible for the head posture, and it is the binocularity that is driving the head posture. So these are two scenarios of patients having superior oblique palsy. So if you notice the photo to the left, this indicates a childhood onset because of the facial asymmetry that is seen. And this is another adult who also actually had a childhood onset problem, but presented later on. So this gentleman has a left face turn. If you can see that the deviation, vertical deviation is more on the left side as compared to the right side, and hence the head posture is present. Now, there can be apparent oblique overactions in the form of inferior oblique overactions, which can be seen as over elevation and adduction. So many a times chin elevation or depression posture is taken to get binocularity in these conditions. This is an example of superior oblique overaction where over depression and adduction is seen, and there is an A pattern strabismus. So the head posture here would generally be a chin depression. Another kid with a different etiology but having the chin up head posture. If you look at the 9-gaze photographs, we see that the elevation is restricted over adduction and abduction equally, and is a case of monocular elevation deficiency. So as in any strabismus, we go ahead with evaluating the stereopsis and the BSV. It should be evaluated with the head posture as well as with the head posture corrected. Alternate cover test is used to determine the fixation preference. So this is another case of MED. So we see that this child does not have a head posture. And when we do the cover test, one eye comes from up to down and the other from down to up, as against in DVD where both eyes come from up to down. The prism cover test has to be done for near, distance, and as well as in all the 9 cases. However, measurements in side gazes and tilts are very important. Now coming to the Parkes 3-step test, trying to decode the most difficult of tests to understand probably. So this test is done mainly to determine the paretic cyclovertical muscle. So let's take an example of right hypertropia. So when the right eye is elevated, we think that the depressors of the right eye are not working and the elevators of the left eye are not working. So these 4 muscles are eliminated, and from 8 muscles we come down to 4 muscles. Then we evaluate the hypertropia in the gazes. So generally, in the case of the gazes, the hyperdeviated eye, on that side, it is the rectus which is involved, while the oblique on the other side. So when the right hypertropia is more in right gaze, it would then boil down to either the right inferior rectus or the left inferior oblique being involved. And then we go on to the measurement in the tilts, which is the Belchowski's head tilt. So when the head is tilted to one side, there is a corrective movement of the intorters and extorters. So when there is a right head tilt, the right intorsion would come into play and the left extorsion would come into play. So you just note down the intorters and the extorters, and accordingly then just boil down. Because the right superior rectus is not in picture over here, it would be the left inferior oblique, which is the muscle involved when the right hypertropia is more in right gaze and right tilt. If you still can't decode this is a small secret. This is idoc.com, which when you just click, you get the answer right away over there. Then also the prism cover test needs to be done in a supine position, which is called as the upright supine position. Why this test is important is if there is more than 50% reduction than the test done in the sitting position, it can indicate
1 minute left.
skew deviation. Ocular motility, when the movement is restricted, deductions as well as saccades need to be evaluated. Torsion obviously needs to be checked for. Now, when the fundus torsion does not correlate with the clinical diagnosis, that is when we suspect a skew deviation, which is nothing but a vertical deviation occurring because of a supranuclear lesion. So this is a gentleman with left eye superior oblique paresis. So we expect a left eye excyclotorsion and a right encyclotorsion. However, when this is opposite is when we suspect skew deviation. Post-duction test is, as described by Dr. Veena Madam, is necessary to assess the restriction towards a movement, and force generation test is used to gauge the strength of the paretic muscle, which is important for surgical planning. So this is an individual with thyroid ophthalmopathy with tight IR and MR, and repression of these muscles gives good results. So just to summarize, correcting the head posture can unveil the underlying vertical strabismus. When the head tilt and torsion do not make sense and the upright supine test is positive, think of skew deviation. Prism cover test in side gazes and tilts are very important, especially for the Parkes test. Both eyes coming from up to down is an indication towards presence of DVD, and FDT and FGT are important to surgical planning. Thank you. Yes, I think I just managed to.
I think.
Thank you very much, Dr. Prachi. Excellent presentation.